Again, my name is Martha Saavedra. I'm from the Center for African Studies at the University of California at Berkeley. And this is the Berkeley Stanford African Innovators Series, or BeSt AI, which is brought to you by the MasterCard Foundation Scholars Programs and the Center for African Studies at both Stanford University and the University of California, Berkeley. Our two universities have educated some of the front edge entrepreneurs and change makers who are working across the African continent. And with this series, we seek to hear from them about their projects, their insights, and what they see for African futures. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful colleague, Laura Hubbard, at the Center for African Studies at Stanford University to introduce the series today. All right, and then I'm going to head off and I'll be listening to this. Go ahead, Laura.
Hi, everyone. As Dr. Saavedra mentioned, I'm the Associate Director at Stanford, and I'm very excited to welcome all of you today to a conversation I think that is just incredibly important and full of exciting and deep questions and lots of potentialities. The title of today's conversation is Trends in African FinTech and Consumer Credit Solutions. And again, this is just a really exciting landscape full of ethical questions and great possibilities. We'll be using the Q&A function, so please use that to pose questions to inspire our two conversationalists and incredible entrepreneurs and just keep us moving along. The chat is disabled, but Q&A is there for you. Today we have two folks who I'm sure will inspire lots of admiration from all of you. Benjamin Fernandez, who is a Stanford GSB alum and friend of all Bay Area CASs. He hails from Tanzania, where he is a mentor to all the CAS folks in East Africa, a media leader, and is the founder of Nala, an East African mobile payment consumer application. He will be in conversation with Omar Saleh, GSB alum also, and CEO of Hanza, a Cairo-based fintech startup that aims to provide mobile financial services to over 20 million Egyptians. Both incredible figures and a really exciting conversation. We're so happy you joined us today. With that, I'm also out. See you at the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much. A big shout out to Stanford University and the University of Berkeley, California for organizing and helping us coordinate everything. Welcome everybody. For those tuning in, I know that we have people tuning in from all around the world today. So welcome to today's session. I'm really excited, and we'll just get started directly. So as Laura mentioned, we are super privileged that we have Omar with us today. Omar, thank you so much for making the time. Where are you dialing in from?
From Cairo, Egypt. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be on this call.
Awesome. So Omar, traditionally on our series of African innovators, we try to invite a Berkeley or Stanford alum to this and basically talk about their journey from where they've been, some of the challenges they faced, where they are today. And we hope to enable a community of, alum from these schools or even people around the world who are tuning in to build stronger relationships together, to get to learn from people like you. So I want to jump in and directly ask you a question. So, you grew up in Egypt, you went to school there, you did a couple different jobs, and then you took this step to move to the United States to go to business school. For those watching, those thinking about going to business school, those considering, what made you think about that? Did you think it was something that was possible? Was it an aspirational thing? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me for this great series. As you mentioned, born and raised in Cairo, went to engineering school here at Cairo University, decided to take the first job that would allow me to travel a lot. So I ended up in the energy sector for a while, working offshore and around Africa and deserts. So, and I think at some point of my career, I decided that I want to do things that are more related to people. So transitioned to a little bit more of a commercial career. And then at that point of time, I had decided that I want to, learn more about general management, about finance, other functions of the business on one side, but more importantly, further expand my network. which I guess is one of the key aspects when someone decides to invest a significant amount of their time in a graduate program, especially a business one. It's a key driver in how you build in order to further advance and build your network. I guess, so it was pretty clear to me that at that point of time, I had entrepreneurial ambitions, wanted to learn a little bit more about entrepreneurship. So where else better than at Stanford? And that's where I ended up, between 2012 and 2013.
Yeah, so for those listening in, so just for background context, Omar grew up in Egypt, went to university in Egypt, took several years to work for a while, then explored coming to the GSB for a business school. Now, Omar, right after you finished business school, you took this decision to work at a couple of different companies before starting your own company today that we'll discuss more in detail later. Can you talk us through that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So like the GSB experience, for those of you who haven't been there, is quite a unique one. It's phenomenal. I'm honestly, like probably the best 2 years of my life and everyone else's life who's been there. So
far.
Yeah, so it's been it's really like you just surrounded with very very smart and passionate and personal human beings, and for me a tremendous experience. That lets you really gives you and then you get this obviously this high level of education and network that allows you. I used to tell my wife, now I have a card to explore, so I have the ability. So you get out of the GSB program and you're highly employable. You're super employable, right? Anyone will want to employ you. But it's a point of time where you can really take a little bit of risk, because what could go wrong, right? Like ultimately, what could go wrong? And for me, that was the plan. I came in with one thing on my mind, left wanting to start my own business, and this is actually what I did out of business school. A bit of also a bit of a byproduct of GSB is that you feel a bit invincible, like being surrounded by all these amazing people and all the speakers, and you feel invincible, and that you're just going out to change the world right from the get-go. But then you get hit by reality. So for me, I got out, decided and started my own venture. That was back in 2014, and spent 2 years trying to build it off the ground. Got to do a lot of things, but ultimately decided to close the business. So my first venture did not succeed, and ended up joining one of my major investors at the time. On a warrior's break, if you like. This is what we call it in Arabic. Like just like a break from battle, if you like, for a couple of years.
What's the actual term in Arabic? I would love to learn this.
It's a warrior's break. So like a break from battle. It's a warrior's break. Yeah.
I see.
So that was. I think it's a pretty accurate analogy for those of you who are or were involved in entrepreneurship or starting your own business. It's such a tiring and like interesting experiment. So that's what I did after the school, and then for 2 years. So got to again like take this. It was a very interesting time. We joined a company that was going through a fast growth phase. My role was to list the company on the London Stock Exchange. We raised around $400 million in debt and equity, and then my role was to deploy the capital, so more like an investment role. And meanwhile, I was, scheming and planning for my next entrepreneurial endeavor.
And for context for everybody listening in, that company was World Remit. So, for those who just tune in right now, this is Omar. Omar went to GSB, graduated in 2014. We were just talking about, where he was at, so he decided to start his own venture right after business school. Had to make some tough decisions about closing that down, which we will discuss. And then joined the company that invested into him, and then shortly after joined world remit where, you know, this is where he started planning for his next venture. So let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I actually joined an Egyptian company that did the IPO and the investments, and then from there, my thoughts were, okay, like I was exploring. That was the phase of exploration, and then decided to do a soft landing with the World Remit, where I led their expansion into the region, into MENA.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then the timing was opportune early last year, and basically started.
So Omar, let's talk about failure. You know, a lot of people tuning in, you know, we talked about this being like, okay, what are fintech trends, etc. Can you talk a little bit more about the first company? Was it also in fintech? You know, what were, let's say, the 2 to 3 biggest lessons you learned from that experience?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a great question. I get excited every time I speak about it because it was such a painful time, but you got so much learning out of it. And I don't think I would have been where I am right now without that experience. So the venture was in the renewable energy space. So we were basically trying to develop a resource that is currently being unutilized, and it's actually very pollutant to the environment. So the idea was to basically collect that source of energy and convert it to something that is commercially available to sale. And we actually did a lot of, so I partnered up with a friend of mine. I was the business person, he was the ops person, like the technical guy. And we actually landed one of our anchor investors early on. And he's a great guy, like one of the big, energy investors here in Egypt and regional. And and we tried to establish this venture for a couple of years. You know, got like in energy it's a bit different, where you got offtake agreements on both sides, and then you've got like financing of that opportunity. So we got the financing lined up, the offtake on both sides, but we finally failed to get government approval. You know, like it's also a highly regulated industry. I seem to be attracted to highly regulated industry, but it's a But it was a primary reason why we couldn't actually buy this gas that was being burned in the desert. We couldn't buy it from the government because the government wasn't going to put a price on it, although they're burning it. So quite a crazy 2 years.
Interesting.
Now I am actually so to your point, the learnings.
Yeah, the lessons. Yeah.
Everything. Yeah, lessons. So I think one of the I got, you go to business school and they tell you, you got to do reference checking and the rest of it, but you really learn it, like the hard way, man. You're like you get involved with someone in a business, and you just gotta do a significant amount of reference checking, and things are like now I do it like I spend probably 30% of my time doing reference checking at this point of time.
Wow.
And it's really, really important, like before getting engaged with someone, any sort of business relationship, etc. You just like spend the time doing the reference checking, right? Like do cold, warm, all sorts of reference checking, because it really, really helps, like prevent a lot of challenges down the line.
Right.
I think the second lesson was, with regards to dealing with governments. So learned a lot of stuff about that. Like here in Africa, government ultimately has a big role, right? In many things, more than you can argue that in any industry, more than the West, right? So you got to really know how to deal with the government, and there's like a specific way. You got to really understand the mindset. You got to understand the drivers. What is the public servant drivers, and how can you lobby behind your particular drivers in order to be able to reach what you really need, right? And so that was a critical lesson that I'm still using today pretty actively. And ultimately, to be very honest with you, I don't think there is a playbook for entrepreneurship, right? There is. It's basically you got to try it if you think you like it. If you try it, you will. It's either it's gonna work, you're gonna like it or not, right? Like it's not for everyone, right? Like really, entrepreneurship is not the answer, right? Like it's like in soccer, there are goalkeepers, there are strikers. So it's whatever. But like we have another saying here in Arabic. It's you got to know why God created you, right? Like this is a really important part. You know, like you talk a lot about introspection in at the GSB.
Yeah.
But really, you know, like you only learn about that when you're out on the street,
right,
in the field, right? Like not really.
Yeah.
And yeah, it takes time, but you gotta keep looking. Stop me, I'll speak.
So just on that note, Omar, thanks for that. A lot of the audience today, you know, some people might be current students tuning in. Some people might be, you know, alums who just recently graduated. Let's talk about the timing piece and like really knowing what you want to do, because you know you get to go to these really cool schools and then it's like, okay, change lives, change organizations, change the world, and then you're graduating, you know, maybe you haven't got the job you want yet, and you're in this place of like, okay, do I start my own thing, do I not? And then specifically with you, right, today you have a family, and you know, you would say, one could argue that you have a lot more responsibility now. You like, you know, with the family, you need more stability and things like that. But you decided to jump back into entrepreneurship. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and why after you started a family and everything, then you decide to jump more into entrepreneurship versus people, you know, one would say the opposite would be like, all right, be more stable later on and then do only entrepreneurship earlier when you're younger. You know, what's your take on that?
I have a bit of a strong opinion here, so guys, bear with me. But I will.
Okay.
I will tell you. I
would love to hear this.
Yeah. I will tell you like again. It's my version. It's what happened to me. It might not be applicable to everyone, but it's
for sure.
It's basically my.
Definitely.
So I got married back in 2010, and actually I had my older son Yusuf. Was born at the GSB while at the GSB.
Wow.
So yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, you know, like as Egyptian and I think as African as well, and generally we have this. We're very fortunate to have this African family safety net thing. Benji, you know what I mean? You know, like it's ultimately, you know, like we're very close to our families. It's by nature. We live close to them. We see them often.
Right.
We help. You know, like it's a very so there is this sense of you know, family safety net, which you know it always helps. I think in my again, you know, in my position as well, getting out of the GSB, highly employable, you know, received, you know, like maybe I don't know 5 or 6 job offers, you know, top firms, like different sectors. So it's a really it's a position of great, you know, I think fortune, and I think many of the people around the line as well have that. So really. And also I got there on a scholarship, so I had zero debt. You know, like obviously not that much on the savings side, no savings, no debt as well. So but honestly, so I was in a good position. Like I was still always like I must say, you know, fortunate enough. So this is like a preface.
Right.
So, you know, like I'll tell you my opinion on children and family, having family. So. Having family is inexpensive. Let me just put it out. Okay, so like it's not really expensive, right? Like if you like, I'm talking again about me. You're having kids, you're having family, you have etc.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost that much. Yeah. I promise you, right? Like I've been through it. It's as long as you don't spend lavishly. Like you're not. It's not really going to be that much different living on your own versus living with a family. It's going to be a slight difference, right? So. I don't buy into that. And this is a very strong opinion, I know, but this is you know, like based on my personal experience. I think a second point on entrepreneurship, right? So there's, I'm a big believer in, again, you know, like back to the point where, you know, like we have this mentality here. You got to know why God created you, right? Like I'm a strong believer in that. Like everyone was created with a special gift, right? So you got to know, you got to try to find as fast as possible. This is the challenge, right? Like as fast as possible out of school or even earlier on, why God created, right? Like, is it to build a product? Is it to become the best engineer? Is it to become the best salesperson? You gotta try out and try to find this as fast as possible, right? And then when you find that, right, like this is really gonna drive your life. This is really gonna be like by being really by doing why God created you, then you can give the best, right? Like you will be psychologically much more happy. You will be able to support your family.
Right.
You'll be able to do this and this and that, right? So it's not really about, is it like entrepreneurship versus do we do do I do like a corporate role and get safety? It's not really about that. It's about what you do best, right? Like why has God created, right? Like ultimately, and if it's entrepreneurship, it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is sexy and everything, but it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship, right? It's not. It's just like one type of like things that you can do, right? Like, and if it's entrepreneurship, then go and do it, right? Like just go and do it, like because you're going to be happy doing it. You're gonna, but you're gonna find a way to make ends meet. If this is really what you were made for, right? So again, it's again, it's a bit of a strong decision. Like I don't see them as a comparable, like corporate versus entrepreneurship at all. Like there's no, you can't really compare both. It's like totally different. That's a bit of a strong opinion, but that's how I.
No, definitely, for sure. Like, and whoever's tuning in, by the way, if you have any questions or want any clarity on a few points, or would love to learn how Omar did one of these things, definitely feel free to drop them in the Q&A. Omar, let's take a shift over to fintech. So a lot of people tuned in because we want to understand, okay, what are the trends in fintech? How is it looking like across the continent? And so would love to move into that space. I think you had some first exposure in fintech from several of your different works, and then like most recently with World Remit. So let's talk about your current company. What do you guys currently do for anybody who's tuning in right now for the first time?
Okay, so Khazna is Egypt's leading financial super app that extends mobile financial services to Egypt's largely underbanked population, right? So the problem that we're tackling, 50 million unique Egyptian smartphones being used by users on a monthly basis, 50 million, and we think that only 20 million thereof have access to banking or financial services in any shape or form, right? So there's a tremendous need here, just like the use of smartphone has greatly eclipsed and frogged the use of financial services, and people, Egypt is still largely cash denominated. So sorry, we have a bit of
that's fine.
Okay.
Don't worry. Yeah, it's back now. Yep.
So we're so again, so that's what we're offering. It's a mobile only experience actually. The way we started is again, we're targeting the low and middle income, which is the segment primarily that are currently unbanked, and the segment that banks cannot really serve using the traditional, branch-based model due to the cost structure. And that, so we're basically offering them a mobile end-to-end experience where they can, take some credit on a salary side, where they can pay their bills, transfer money, buy on installment, and very soon, have their own account.
Okay, so right now, like you've been focusing, like your go-to-market has been a salary advance product, right? So somebody, let's say they're working somewhere, they maybe get paid at the end of the month. You guys front money to them, and then maybe they pay you guys back at the end of the month when they finally get paid. Is that correct? As one of the services you offer.
It's over a course of several. It's over a course of several months, and it's it's designed particularly again for the middle class that don't really have access to such services from banks. Ultimately, we're into the business. Let me try to simplify it. We're into the business of matching people's inflows with their outflows in terms of expenses. Right? People usually get their inflows at the end of each month. What we're trying to do is try to match and streamline, the inflows with the outflows. This is what we're trying to do, starting with the corporate side.
And look, across the African continent, I'm sure even some people, I've seen some questions coming in here about different fintech ideas. There's hundreds of different ideas of things that you could work on. Why did you pick to work on the product that you're working on right now?
Sure. That's a great question. I think it's
how did you start? Like, where did the idea come from? Like,
I guess in like we've got like 4 values at Khazna, and I think like we've got like one of the core things that we try to emphasize and say at Khazna is the core foundation of us is customer centricity and being focused on the customer. We think that the company, the African company that will be most focused on its customers, that is going to be the winner, right? Like very clearly, there's no doubt about it. Okay? So what we did is that we did extensive, like user research and user testing about the needs, right? About what the major needs are, and how to fill those needs. And we found that credit for this particular segment is one of the major challenges that people have to look for alternative channels that are usually inefficient, very expensive, and in many cases are unable to access any credit. That this is the core.
Right.
This is like one of the main areas of challenge over here. So this is why we decided to start this way. The reason why we started, we're launching a mass market product, over the next few months.
Okay.
And the reason why we started the corporate side is because you obviously get great economies of scale. You're able to acquire customers at a very low cost. You go to one of the large corporates and you're able to acquire thousands of users. You also get a lot of data. You're able to access their payroll ahead of getting, so you get paid before they get paid. So it's a relatively low risk kind of product. And our plan is to basically use our first 10,000 users as our acquisition tool or like as our referrals, our springboard towards mass market, towards our first 100,000 users.
Nice. So one thing just on this note, Omar, so like somebody listening in right now maybe has an idea, right? And you talked about this whole aspect of customer centricity, where it's like, let's say, you interview users, you try to identify, and one thing that might be hard, is you might see so many different problems, right? How do you decide, like, when do you feel like you've got enough conviction to say like, all right, we're going to start with this, like whether it's a salary advance product as our first product? Like, can you walk me through that, and what advice do you have from somebody listening that's maybe tossing around a few ideas and not sure what they would start?
No, I have another strong opinion here. Like my opinion is just start, honestly. There's so many opportunities across the 4 or 5 finance verticals, or like generally in Africa is so untapped. So just start, and things will come, right? Like you will adapt, you will have to pivot and change and adapt all the time, right? Like we started off by offering a pure like savings product. We pivot to the mass market. We pivoted a lot to credit, and then we're now doing payment and bill payment and peer-to-peer. So like it's one of those things, like that you learn at Stanford and at the GSB, is that you just got to start and then iterate, and things will come. And then the idea is, how do you gradually start becoming better in these feedback loops, right? Like how do you create those feedback loops with your users in order to become as efficient as possible in designing your own destiny and your own future, right? Like at this point initially we're using the very sporadic kind of user testing and research. At this point of time, we have a standalone product team that does like weekly user testing, issues a weekly report. We have we have 2 calls on a weekly basis, like our entire company. One of them is our stand-up call, just like the team update call. And then the second one is the user centricity, or the user obsession call, customer obsession call. This is what it's called. So really, you got to build really quickly this routine of going to the market, testing, iterating, and then going out again to the market. Like this is the only way. There's no other way. So don't waste time thinking about the idea. That's my again strong opinion here.
Okay. So for everybody listening, don't waste too much time thinking about the idea. Getting started is the most important piece here from Omar from Khazna. Omar, let's talk about this. One question that we find very often that people come up to us and ask, even on these speaker series, is, hey, I'm a business person. I have a great idea. I don't have a technical co-founder. What do I do? What advice do you have for that person?
It's a very critical one. It's really fundamental. Like to what you're building. Ultimately, we are a tech company, right? Like tell people it's a tech company and it's a product that needs to be built by a tech team, and you need a very strong technical co-founder. It took me a while actually. Like it took me probably more than 7 months to find my co-founder and our CTO.
Wow.
Very lucky to have him on board. Very like, and it's not really about for the lack of other candidates, but it's like in my mind, like having the co-founder relationship is the most similar probably to marriage, right? Because you're kind of it's you gotta go into it with no intention of ending it, right? Like you're just gonna go together like for a long time, right? Like and in my opinion, you gotta really invest time and effort into making sure that this works, right? Just like marriage, right? Like you can't just like jump into marriage, right? Like so. And the way we do it is so basically you got to use your network. Most of the people on the line have tremendous networks, so you got to do networking all the time, asking about the right technical folks. And secondly, you got to be vicious about reference checking. Again, back to this point, spending a lot of time on reference checking, and then like for the tech side, if you don't have a tech background, then you got to bring someone with a tech background to do evaluate. Right? Like you can't really So in our case, this is what we did. So we relied on a few of our like investors and friends and have a tech background in order to go through the technical background check and make sure like everything falls in place. And then finally, I think what really has worked for Khazna very well, if you ask me what I'm most proud about, is the team right now. Is that we've built a tremendous team. Is that you really engage, like for those senior managers, you just got to engage, right? Like again, back to the point, engage. And see how things work, right? Like you gotta engage, like small. It should be like a small engagement. It couldn't be like too long, but it's just like an engagement for people to try each other, right? Like ultimately, like some of the greatest people, you cannot put them together in one room, right? Like you gotta test the chemistry. People need to be able to work together. So like in my mind, like this is what I followed, and this is how things worked out. I'm very happy about it.
Yeah. So okay, so for everybody who just tuned in right now, feel free to drop some questions in over here. We are shifting also more into fintech as well throughout. So Omar, the takeaway I got from there is spending quite a bit of time finding the CTO. It's such an important decision because it's like a marriage. Number two, if you're not technical, finding friends or potential like good friends that can help interview them and give you like a lay of the land, saying like, hey, I think they're good at this, but they're not so good at this. So you can have a better picture of that. And then the third thing that Omar talked about here is testing the water and the chemistry between the team. Great. So let's head into fintech again over here. There are many ideas, right? And what do you think? Let's talk about trends in fintech across the African continent. I know you're based in Egypt, but I'm sure you've been looking at many different fintech companies across the continent, and you've probably seen this from your previous work. But what do you think are a couple trends you're going to see exploring or happening across the continent in the next 5 to 10 years? In your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think we're in a very unique timing. Generally speaking, timing is very critical. When you start a business, it's very important that if you've got the best team and you're a bit too early, nothing will happen. If you're slightly late, I think it's also going to be challenged to catch up. I think timing right now in Africa is probably the best timing ever. As we've seen in many African countries, there has been this initial wave of payments, which is like very similar to what happened, what's happening in other emerging markets. So the first wave of payments has started happening across across Africa, where not just the well-off, but also like the average.
Right. Can everybody hear Omar? Just checking. Can everybody hear Omar?
He seems to have frozen.
Cool. That's all right. I'll ping him in the meantime.
He's unfrozen.
For those, hey Omar, we we lost you for a couple seconds over there. Right after you're talking about the timing piece. So the last 30 seconds we missed you.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So yeah, so I was saying I think we're in a pretty opportune time in Africa. I think we've seen like across the continent, there's been this initial wave of payments that most African have been able to transact one way or another using payments, either using smartphone or using devices, etc. And usually what happens, what we've seen in other markets, emerging markets, is that a lot happens after that, right? Like, so after that, usually after you have this initial payment kind of transaction proven, then you can go into all other verticals, like being savings, investments, lending, insurance, and the rest of it. So it's a very, very interesting time, I would say, across Africa. I think this is one of the things that we see very, very clearly. I think what we will see as well is another trend is that gradually you're seeing the emergence of super apps. So you are seeing companies. It used to be the case where you got to go and you really sort out one of the verticals, be it savings, payments, or lending, and then once you've sorted that out and you've mastered it, you go to others. But what's happening right now is that many companies from the get-go are trying to bundle several financial services in one app. They realize that by doing so, that you're able to really, like serve the user in a better way, get more of their time and attention in the app, and I guess serve them in a better way. So I think this is happening consistently, that we're seeing that as well. And there will be more and more emergence of financial, but also super apps in general, right? I think another interesting thing is on the investor side, we're seeing, like international investors showing a lot of tremendous interest in Africa across the board. You yourself, Benjamin, have been able to attract some of Silicon Valley's top investors to Tanzania and to Africa. I think we've been very lucky to have top international VCs supporting Khazna since the very early days, and now that we're ramping up towards the upcoming round, we're in discussions with top global VCs that are interested to explore Khazna, interested to explore Egypt for a very first time, right? So there's tremendous interest in the continent. And I think it's, again, like timing couldn't be better. Like from one side, the regulators, the governments realize they've seen the impact that the Ubers of this world and the Amazons have done in the regions coming from outside. And they're now ready to support the local Uber and the local Amazon, right? And the local, call it, like digital financial service provider. So I think it's very unique timing. And these are the trends we're seeing.
Yeah. So I want to dive into a little bit more of those trends, and also I'll be starting to call on some questions from the audience. So if you have questions you haven't asked yet, feel free to drop them in. We'll start picking some of them out to touch on. I know there's some aspect of government being supportive, but we have some questions on regulation, so we'll dive more into that. So thanks for sending those in. I want to talk about just fintech in general. So you're doing fintech business to consumer, like with your application. Now, there's a saying across the world that says, every fintech, wants to become a digital bank. What is your perspective on this? What do you think is actually happening? I know you talked about super apps bundling multiple financial services together. Can you share a little bit more light on your thoughts there?
Yeah, sure. No, I get that point. Like for us, like I think we're pragmatists. More like what we'd like to be known for is the most customer-centric financial super app or financial app, as opposed to like a bank or not. Like honestly, people need to read all the regulation and compliance requirements associated with the word bank before they want to be a digital bank. In my mind, it doesn't always help really. It sounds very cool, but it's not really what we're into. Building the most customer-centric service and product. This is what we're looking for. So we don't really focus too much about what it's called. And also, like one of and I think this is linked to one of the first questions we've got here. FinTech is a highly regulated industry,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And you gotta be really, really, really careful about that topic, right? Like, so don't go call yourself a bank without knowing what the repercussions of that is, right? Like, so there is tremendous there is like, it's a highly regulated industry, should be, right? Like financial services and banking deals with people's money. It's a very sensitive and personal topic. Like people, it should be a highly regulated industry. This is again my personal opinion. So you gotta really know. So for us here, we study the regulations very carefully and make sure that we are on which side. This is a very, very critical part. Ultimately, a lot could go wrong. We've seen many scandals, you know, across the different financial players, small and large. So you really gotta focus on the regulatory angle, and you really need to understand it before jumping and offering a service.
Right. Just on that note, let's look into Egypt's tech scene really quickly, in case there are people from Egypt actually considering moving back home, or looking to understand what does that actually look like today. Could you touch a little bit more on that? You know, we've seen some exits in Egypt already. We saw recently that we had an Egyptian startup being valued at $1 billion, which was crazy. And can we talk a little bit more about you know, the scene in general, and like, is there a supportive ecosystem? How does one get started before we dive into the Q&A session?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. A few things. I think, like, the reason why I think so, time is opportunity. We spoke a little bit about the size of the market, and just to be very frank, the banks are just like not set up to cater for all, especially for retail and SMEs. Banks, traditional banks are not set up to cater for them. So tremendous opportunity. You know, as you mentioned, there's been success of Fawry and the likes here in Egypt. Fawry is obviously the largest example.
Right.
We have a very strong partnership with Fawry ourselves as well. So our users can pay their bills using Fawry through an integration with Fawry. But also, I think what's really important is, you know, back to the regulatory part, is that the Central Bank of Egypt has been extremely supportive, right? Extremely supportive. And we've seen that through different ways, right? First of all, issuing new specific regulations that allows for fintechs and for like banks and financial institutions to work together by instructing banks and enabling fintechs and connecting fintechs with banks in order to cater for that. And I think very recently there's been the issuance of the new banking law, which has a very clear, you know, futuristic view of how the banking financial services would look like. And it's I would say super progressive. And the regulation is just like honestly, we're very lucky and fortunate to have you know, Central Bank of Egypt supporting, you know, over the last 3 or 4 years to move towards like a digital economy. So it's really we're in a very, very lucky and opportune timing. Honestly, like timing wise, now is the time.
Okay. Just on that note, we'd love to jump into our first question over here. So we have a question from Tunde, who's looking to understand a little bit. So, you know, Tunde, I'm going to read the question over here. I'm working on using artificial intelligence to help increase financial inclusion in Africa. When deciding to go back to Africa to start a new high-tech venture, what framework would you advise I use in making a decision in which African country to start in? Apart from Egypt, of course.
I'm biased. Yeah.
But general framework, how would you think about this problem? Yeah.
Sure. Like I'll tell you about my personal framework. Like for me, it was clear. You know, like my own country where I have my network and where I know the like if you're probably better off in the place where you've got the best network and the best understanding, etc. I would definitely also have a look at the regulatory environment in different countries. You know, like I know like central banks across the region. Like I dealt with the central bank in Nigeria and in Morocco and in Egypt and South Africa. You know, very, very progressive markets. Definitely would look at the opportunity size and the size of the market, because this really matters. Right? What is the size of the market that you're tackling? So you gotta really view that. Yeah. So in my mind, the network the regulatory environment and the size of the network, like, and the size of the market. Sorry, these are three primary.
Market.
I would also like the fourth one is like look at success stories. Like, so you've got the success story, the InterSwitch story, the Fowry story, like the many other success stories. Just go where there is some success that's been proven, because it helps the risks business a lot. That's my view.
So thank you, Omar. Second question over here is a little bit about regulation. So the question goes, I'm working on a money transfer application that is that I believe is able to tackle untapped potential of money transfer industry. Fortunately, as software developers, building the application is manageable, but what we're struggling in finding out is vital information on what regulatory controls, local and international, should I plan on considering. Most of our total addressable market is planned for Africa. So a little bit on regulation. So I know you experience a lot of this, especially at World Remit, because that's a heavy regulated industry with the remittances, probably the most regulated industry for money transfer specifically. What advice do you have for this person? I think the name is Koom. I'm probably butchered that. I'm sorry. Who has asked this question?
So I'm going to assume this is like a cross-border, like a remittances play here, and not like an intra, because they're very different. Like if it's an intra-border versus a cross-border, they're very different. So intra-border is primarily governed by the local regulations of a certain country. It varies a lot, but it's obviously much easier than cross-border. So cross-border has its own, like as you mentioned, Benjamin, you know a lot about that as well. It has a lot. It's a set of challenges, and I'll tell you a little bit about the way to think about it. About cross-border payments. So the unit of a cross-border payment business is a corridor. So a corridor is basically consists of a sending market and a receiving market, right? And so it usually requires, in order to successfully execute the corridor, you need to be able to be present in some form across the corridor sides, right? Like on the sending side, there's usually a license required, and it's probably much more work, requires more work and more heavy lifting on the regulatory side. So you need to figure out what are the requirements on the sending side that would allow you to basically initiate a transfer, right? On the recipient side, it's usually less challenging. It usually requires partnerships with existing players that have access to stores of value, be it wallets, bank accounts, cash outlets, etc. So it will require more work on the sending side. My opinion, my advice here is just like focus on start with a corridor, start with the unit, or a couple of corridors in order to hedge your risk a little bit, and figure those out before like growing to others. And I guess that's that. And it's very different from one market to the other. I can tell you on the sending side, obviously here in the Middle East, there are a couple of major sending countries, and the regulation is just like so different, like by country. So you really need to prioritize what your corridors are, and the best way is to start with those and then move to the others, in my opinion. And usually a lot of this regulation is already existing, and you can learn a lot from looking at the corridor main players, which are available online as well.
Yeah. And there's a lot of World Bank data that's really publicly available about like how much money is moved into that space, and then really diving to that. We have a question here from Safia Ismail, and it's about Egypt. So Egypt has established itself as a major tech startup hub in North Africa. Do you anticipate that other countries in North Africa, like Morocco, for example, will also become a hub? And what have been the favorable or contributing factors for Egypt's startup boom? And then I guess they added a third question in there about Francophone Africa. So if you can just touch into that briefly. But
Sure.
I have a comment on this personally, but I want to hear from you first.
Yeah, listen, I love Moroccans. Like some of my best friends are Moroccans. We've been to Morocco like 10 times and did a lot of business in Morocco while with World Remit. To be very honest with you, I think on the banking side of things, honestly, I would say Morocco is more advanced than Egypt. You've got like the top 5 banks in Morocco are present in maybe each in like 10 plus countries, primarily Francophone African countries. Egyptian banks are still primarily in Egypt. Egypt is a much larger market, 3 or 4 times the Moroccan market. So I'm personally, I'm very, very super impressed by the Moroccan banks and the Moroccan financial institutions. I'm following a lot of them on Facebook and on social media. You know, we've got like cash outlets. Obviously, Morocco, similar to Egypt, is a larger remittance receiving market, and this is why I was there. So I think, to be very honest with you, I think Egypt has done like the central bank in Egypt has done a tremendous job in crafting regulations and in taking some risk with the early stage ventures, with opening things up in a gradual shape. And we're seeing also the Financial Regulatory Authority now driving for a fintech law and licensing fintechs. So obviously, like a flexible regulator helps a lot.
Wow, that's huge.
The regulator in Morocco is also super progressive. I think mobile wallets kicked off, you know, a couple of years ago, and now you've got like these prepaid cards that you can issue as well, like as a service provider. I think Morocco is definitely on the right track. And like, plus there is the heritage of the Moroccan banks, right? Like that are already present all over Africa, right? So honestly, personally, I have a, you know, like I admire the Moroccan banking system and the banks, the private and government banks, and really think that it is really a big, you know, again, you know, establishing itself as a tech hub. I think there's a lot happening in Morocco on the startup side. Obviously, it's you know, it takes time. You know, scale. You know, the market in Egypt is larger. You know, like Morocco has access to these francophone countries. So I would personally, I think there's a lot of you know, a lot of hope, and a lot of room for growth for Moroccan startups, both in Morocco and across the francophone countries.
Right. Yeah, my general thought on this is actually pretty short. So for example, like in the US, you have like the Valley, you maybe have like, you know, the New York area, maybe you have, you know, Boston area. And then you have all these other cities, like you have Minneapolis, which probably won't be a tech hub. You have, you know, other cities across the states. And that's kind of how I actually look at the African continent is, yes, I'm Tanzanian, but Nairobi is always going to be a better tech ecosystem and hub than Dar es Salaam, where I'm sitting at right now. As much as I would love Dar to be, once the ecosystem starting to be built, like, you know, so much starts to flow into place. And that's how, that's my own personal perspective on ecosystems and hubs across the continent. Omar, we have one last question over here before we're going to hand over. So one last question here is, as somebody who might be watching or listening in right now, they want to know, okay, how do I get started? Where do I get started? What is your final tip of advice for somebody listening in something that you believe about the tech ecosystem across the African continent and where you'll see it going?
No, honestly,
especially fintech.
I think timing could not be better. You know, like we're starting to see even like on the transaction and exit level, you're seeing, you know, companies going public. You're seeing companies such as Sendwave being acquired. You know, it's such a vibrant market right now. Like my advice, you know, like it has really worked well for me and could work well for others as well. If you're really unsure about where to start, just get in the deal flow, right? Like get into a position where you'll get to see things are happening, right? Like join one of the big African fintechs or one of the big startups, or come join Khazna, and you'll get to see a lot of what's happening throughout the ecosystem, and you'll get to experience things firsthand. You know, get your hands dirty. You know, like this is what I would say.
Are you hosting internship opportunities this summer?
Absolutely. For this group, definitely, yes.
Well, yeah. So how does someone find you, just in case they want to reach you?
Yeah, I'll text everyone my email address. Please feel free to follow up questions or whatever.
Well, cool. Thank you so much, Omar. Definitely post your email in there. It's omar@khazna.app. So for those listening and tuning in, I'm going to be handing over to back to Berkeley over here pretty shortly. But one last comment I'm going to say just to the audience. We've had the privilege of having Omar. Omar, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. We really appreciate it. For the audience, if there are speakers you'd like to recommend, Berkeley, Stanford alum, we will be bringing in other people as well who are quite influential in tech across the African ecosystem. If you'd like to recommend somebody, feel free to let the Center of Africa Studies at your different university or school know, or shoot back on the email invite that you got for this event, so we can learn who you'd like to see upcoming and next. And a big thank you to Stanford and Berkeley for helping organize and coordinate everything. Martha, off to you.
All right. Hello. Thank you both, Omar and Benji, for doing this for us. There's so much interest in FinTech, in different aspects of it. And I think we've learned a lot, and we appreciate that also you're open for future contacts and for internships, because that's always something that our community is very, very interested in. Again, as Benji said, if anybody is interested, please contact us. Our email at Berkeley is asc.berkeley.edu. I'm just putting it in there now. Laura, maybe she could type in the Stanford email in there. I also want to say that we have recorded this, and it will go on the YouTube channel, so people can look at it later or send it to others. And I will put that up there right now. So let's see, you can, I believe that is the YouTube channel for the Center for African Studies at Berkeley. And if you do subscribe to us, at some point we can actually come up with our own name instead of that long number alphabet name there. Well, thank you again to everyone. And in a month or so, we will announce the next BeSt AI series. And we know that from Berkeley and Stanford to the rest of Africa, this is something that we really want to highlight and to bring people together to look towards the futures and the opportunities on the African continent. I think with that, we're going to say goodbye and give people an extra 3 minutes of their day. So thank you everyone, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. All right, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.